How far we have departed.
How far?
I hear people often saying that they have their Second Amendment rights, but isn't that incorrect? Isn't it God-given right protected by the Second Amendment?
Yes, and actually what was otherwise not a particularly good suit that was, or decision that came down in the 19th century, Cruikshank, observed the very truth that rights do not originate from the government having established them, but that the rights, such as the Second Amendment, predated the existence of the American Republic and its Constitution. All the Constitution is doing is observing their reality and endeavoring to protect rights that inhere in individuals, because that's the way God made us.
Go back 20 years or so, you were considered to be a main factor in the spread of militias, and there were lots of attacks on the concept of militias going on at the time. What was your attitude about that, and is it the same today?
The militia movement seems to have subsided. I think as much as anything, it was a response to the government's effort to ban semi-automatic firearms that are called by gun banners assault weapons, even though they're not. And when the law passed, people variously gave up, but also noticed that in the ban itself, there was a provision for a sunset in 10 years. And happily, that sunset has come and gone, and the law is no longer on the books. And so I think that was the removal of one of the major concerns that led to people talking about organizing as militia, because it became a lot of people's fear in the late 80s and early 90s that the government was intent on disarming the people, even as Great Britain had endeavored to disarm our forefathers, and they wanted to be as organized as our forefathers had been organized. They wanted to have a well-regulated militia, which meant something that would be able to express the sovereign will of the people, even if the government, which was supposed to itself be an expression of the sovereign will of the people, if the government went off track, the people would still be on track.
You've been trashed somewhat by Rolling Stone magazine, which
Good.
That you're the guy that stands in the way of any meaningful gun control. So how do you respond to that?
Well, I hope Rolling Stone is correct, although we haven't always won our battles, and so I'm not sure, even if we're the only ones standing against gun control, that we're actually necessarily keeping it from happening. We try. Not only do we try to keep new gun control laws from being added to the books, but we try to take existing ones off the books.
And is that what separates you from some of these other groups?
I think that's one of the things that does set Gun Owners of America apart, that we really are trying to find politicians who will introduce legislation and then push that legislation to get rid of the bad laws that have been put on the books.
Are there any bad laws currently on the books that you're worrying about?
Well, all the gun laws that are on the books are bad laws.
Are there any gun laws being considered to add to the books?
Well, yes, and we just lost a battle over substituting a psychiatrist's diagnosis for due process in a court of law. And this specifically has hammered veterans. And that's why we, even though the law, now it's law, applies to more than just veterans, they're the ones who have a diagnosis that triggers loss of gun rights. They're the ones whose diagnoses have been put into computers at the Veterans Administration and then sent over to the FBI to be added to the Brady instant checklist of people who can't buy a gun. Hence, we call it the Veterans Disarmament Act. And there were two major objections to this, even though we thought these were compelling. The NRA supported this measure, and this was one of the things that really separated us from the NRA. We objected to the idea that one person's unsubstantiated opinion, a psychiatrist no less, who's hardly an objective person, and nor is he practicing anything scientific. In fact, psychiatry is highly political, and if we look at the last century, we find that in a number of countries, psychiatry was prostituted by the government and used as the handmaiden to dispose of unwanted people, including politically incorrect people. We think that it's important that if somebody's going to lose his right to keep and bear arms, something which the founders themselves believed in. They didn't think criminals should have guns, but the idea that you could just lose your gun rights because of a diagnosis instead of a trip to court with all the due process, ability to confront your accuser, ability to have your attorney protecting your rights throughout that whole process, very different question. And it's just been given up. And we were aghast that the NRA would sign off on that, because this is something that has the potential to be broadened to people who have had other diagnoses that allegedly would make them possibly a danger to self and to others.
Do you think the enemies of gun rights could find a psychiatrist who could say that you're a dangerous type person? And
there's no question that psychiatrists are politically, as a group, with a few exceptions, to the hard left. There was a study published several years ago at Berkeley University representing the opinions of a number of psychiatrists from around the country. And they thought that they had found the Rosetta Stone for identifying dangerous right-wing personalities such as Hitler's. And they found that why Hitler and Limbaugh had the same characteristics, that they didn't see grays. They only saw black and white. And of course, any preacher that was preaching from the Bible would also be accused of the same problem of not seeing any grays, and that could certainly be the accusation leveled against any gun owner who thinks that some assailant who's in the process of attacking him needs shooting, because that's kind of black and white.